Well, this is Robby's 85 CJ7, and a little different than what we normally do here because it's not full LS swapped, 1-ton axles, spring over. This is a very tasteful, clean CJ7 build, and we're actually really happy with it. So 1985 CJ7, at first glance, it doesn't look like very much has been done to it, but we kind of went and buttoned up a whole bunch of little finish up items on it. To start with, we actually put Wrangler springs all the way around in this. So this has the YJ 2.5-inch BDS military wrap leaf springs front and rear. So in the rear, back here, we went ahead and built a new shackle hanger up there and used YJ small bushings at the top of the sleeve, 9/16 hardware. Here's your military wrap BDS spring, still sprung under. You look underneath there, you can see our WFO 5/8 U-bolts, spring plates, and then we added a stud to the lower spring plate to fit the Bilstein shocks that we added. So for the suspension underneath, still spring under, 2.5-inch lift, and that fits the 31-inch BFG KMG tires. So these are 31 1050 15, and that is a 15x8 aluminum wheel, powder coated black. So not a huge tire, really goes good with the package. Trying to make it almost like an original Jeep, nice driver with updated springs and bushings. When we put the 2.5-inch springs in the back, we added 4-degree shims that we sell at WFO. That turned the driveline up. We were worried we might have to do a CV in the rear, but we always try before and see if they vibrate, and this Jeep does not vibrate. So the 4-degree shims with the 2.5-inch lift, stock front and rear drive lines, and goes down the highway pretty smooth. On the rear, we weren't too into the factory CJ rear bumper, so we built one of our signature series 2x4 rear bumpers. Andrew did that out of 3/16. Added our weld-on clevis mounts there for toe points, and then included a 2-inch receiver on the bottom of the bumper. This bumper is welded onto the back of the Jeep. We like to do that because it also strengthens the back of the CJ frame, which is really thin metal and not so strong. So when you pull off of that, you're fully spot welded all the way across the back of the Jeep. For those of you who have the back portion rusted out, we even sell a frame plate that's the shape of the back sheet metal of the Jeep that you could overlay first before you weld the bumper on. As we work our way up to the front, we did the same thing. Now we also added our shackle reversals. So as you look down underneath there, there's the 2.5-inch military wrap YJ spring. You can see the sleeve welded through the frame right there. The front has 4-inch shackles with 9/16 bolts, just the same as the rear, 4-inch shackles with 9/16 bolts. So sleeve through the frame, and then you look up front here. We actually made a new shackle reversal that works with YJ springs and keeps the axle only about 3/4 of an inch forward from its stock location. So instead of stretching way up here like most of our shackle reversals to get wheelbase, this one was designed to go in more of a stocker Jeep, work with the spring under, and keep the axle in the perfect location. If you take a look here in the front, you can see our U-bolts, 5/8 U-bolts, 3/8-inch spring plates underneath. We added 2 tabs to the axle right here for the factory sway bar to hook back up. Keep it almost original. We didn't change the drag length, the tie rod, anything. Where it really gets neat on this one is the front of the Jeep. So from the front, you can see the WFO shackle reversal box drop in here. But this is the cool part on this Jeep. So Andrew has been kind of morphing our 8274 mount kit. All right, Andrew, tell us what you've done on this CJ.
So I done something on this one.
Yeah.
This is a chunk of the front cross member of the frame. And as you can see, we have a hole here.
So put that down there. Where did you cut that out?
So on this, I typically use my plates that do a little filling to kind of
make
mark
the line
out
to
where the
cut
lines
out.
go.
Yep.
But this goes tangent to each edge of the circle, which
Yep.
makes it super easy because that's just straight across from there. I believe there's 5 plates. You've got 2 on each side. This one incorporates for the 3rd hole if you're doing a moor mount for your steering box.
Yep.
And then the back cap that just kind of keeps all the rigidity on the back side there where the body mounts.
Yep.
And then this 2x4 bumper here with a little bit of extra stuff going on, just rolls right onto the front.
And the bumper is notched out right here because...
So the 8274s are mounted with the bolts going in from the front, and they're a little too deep to just go flat with the inside of the bumper and clear the body mount. So we had to do a notch out of the tubing so that they can sit forward a little further and clear everything.
And you do this where the bumper welds on, right?
Right, weld straight to the front of the frame. You don't have to cut the frame down. You don't have to add anything. You just have to plate in where you cut out that center section.
Yep, and that's the stock CJ frame length.
Right.
That allows the 8274 to fit in there. And then this front bumper is basically a broke piece, two 2x4 pieces, and voila, you got 8274 sunk in.
That's right, and if you're doing a shackle reversal, our box drop bolts right onto the bottom. It doesn't affect any of that mounting.
And then the shackle reversal is right over here on the counter. And here's the shackle reversal, bolts in with 3 bolts on each side. You can weld it or just bolt it in.
Right, so that bumper sits right on this edge of this weld. So if you wanted to add any extra strength to the center where that winch is going to be pulling from, you can throw some stitch welds in there. And
make it a little more rigid. Yep, rigidity. I get you. All right, and that's it. CJ Weld do-it-yourself front bumper kit. New Warn 8274 with synthetic rope, and we cut out the whole center section of the frame there, have a weld-in plate kit, drop the 8274 Warn Winch. We drop it down in the bumper, and then this is not a bolt-on bumper. This is still 2x4 3/16 material, but it's fully welded in. So it boxes the whole front of the frame rails, strengthens the steering box mount, allows the winch to sit down low, and it's actually 3 pieces. It's one end piece, then a piece of 1/4 inch in the middle broke to fit that winch and sink it down. So to add even more strength, we got 3 bolts right here that bolt into the top of the box drop from the winch mount to kind of make this whole front of the Jeep rigid. Once again, stock steering, and there's no shims in the front with the 2.5 inch Wrangler springs and this shackle reversal, and we're getting about 5.5 degrees of caster. One other thing I forgot to tell you about is when we did the winch and the plating of the frame and mounting everything, we used the Mountain Off-Road 1-inch forward steering box mount that brought the box forward more, which allows us to have the shackle reversal that moved the axle a little bit forward. And then, it's kind of a snowball effect, then we also have to add, and you can't really see it here, is the Borgeson steering shaft as well, with U-joints top and bottom and a new slip. So that tightens up the steering as well. So whenever you do one thing, it always snowballs into the other thing, but we redid the shackle reversal kit, so you're only doing those things and you're not doing a new driveline, new shock mounts, and going too far forward. So gives it that really classic factory CJ look to it. Other things that had to be modified in doing the shackle reversal would be the spring plates that we have that add the shock mounts in the rear, and then in the front, the 2 tabs on the axle for the sway bar drop downs to attach to. Now, one thing people will ask, okay, did you modify the front drive line to work with the shackle reversal? So with shackle reversal, the front axle kind of swings down and away instead of back and towards the transfer case, so you do need more slip in the front drive line. To add to that, we move this thing 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch forward for clearance here in the back of the wheel well, nice and low. So it did pull the slip out a little bit in the front drive line. So if you take a look over here and you look underneath, we can see there aren't any splines showing on the front drive line yet, but the old drive line was right here before, and now we're about 3/4 of an inch farther forward. Part of that's the lift as well. So the factory drive line still works in this. What we had to check was we had to droop the suspension out and make sure that the splines weren't going to pull apart. Because as soon as you go up a hill, if your drive line doesn't have enough engagement, the splines will pull apart, it'll twist the drive line, it'll be a problem. This is right on the edge of what we accept, but it is still totally acceptable and it has good engagement. But when you're doing a shackle reversal, you've got to think about that. Once you go to the other side, we'll open the door, show you a few things inside. So on the inside here, it's absolutely kept classic, right down to the OEM seat covers, just has a Tuffy 10-inch center console. But here's some of the things that happen on these CJ builds. So he took it to a stereo shop, had somebody put a stereo in the dash. In order to do that, they have to take a Sawzall or something and cut the opening. When they did that, they broke the needle off of the factory volt gauge. Well, it seems like it'd be pretty simple to add a new, buy a new volt gauge, just put it in. We bought one, a Crown one, tried to put it in. It runs into the heater ducts. It's not original. It's got a bunch of crappy plastic. So we went above and beyond, actually took the gauge apart, put the new internals and needle in the old gauge housing, put it back together. We had to do a little extra work to get it clean and original looking. So the same thing on the original gauge cluster as well. This thing came in, it had two aftermarket, the temp gauge and the fuel gauge aftermarket. One thing you can't forget is that the temp gauge gets its power off the fuel gauge. The fuel gauge gets powered with 12 volts. Then there's an inline resistor that takes it down to 5 volts for the temp gauge. If you're rewiring a Jeep and you just hook 12 volts up to everywhere, your gauges won't work. So he had aftermarket fuel and temp gauge in this cluster that were not working properly. It turns out that the fuel gauge was actually rattled loose and had problems internal. It was grounding out on itself, all due to cutting the hole in the dash with a Sawzall. We bought one fuel gauge from Crown. We have no choice. It didn't work. Then we bought a second fuel gauge and it did work. But this, just to get the gauges to work properly in these Jeeps, sometimes can be days worth of work. And the quality of the parts we're getting these days are garbage. So what we do, we go the extra mile. I have an extra sending unit here at the shop for CJ that before we put it into the bezel and rebuild it, we hook it up, we move the sending unit up and down, we make sure that the fuel gauge travels properly. That's how we knew the one was bad. Inside here, take a look at the roll bar. So we went ahead and powder coated the roll bar black. We had to sandblast it, powder coat it, and of course add our speaker cans to the roll bar with these 6.5-inch speakers tied into the stereo. And then he is running the original 3-inch behind the dash speakers as well. So there's 4 speakers, no amp, in-dash stereo. It actually really sounds good in here when you're driving it, kind of classic and old school. One of the last things we did inside, which is always annoying on the CJs, and this thing has a T5 in it, is T5s are notorious for the shifter being floppy loose. And the shifter doesn't directly bolt into the transmission. There is a rectangle kind of slip together scenario there with a bushing. They always wear out, they crack, they get loose. So one of the things we do is we take them apart, we put a metal band around it, we weld a nut on there, and then add a set screw so that it is rigid mounted now. There's no movement. So now, people think their transmissions are worn out. Now the stick is very rigid, shifts really nice, and it's not sloppy. So that little addition right there goes a long way just on your drivability. So in the end, I mean, this thing is absolutely classic, perfect, fun to drive. I want to drive it all summer long. Can't wait to see Robby take the top off, take it up to the lake. You got to pull somebody out. You got 8274 in the front. It does have, before we got it, Robby did this, so it does have Howell fuel injection on it. Other than that, factory shroud, factory radiator, still has a factory distributor. I mean, look at the OEM jack is still on the fender. So all the stuff here intact, the horn, the windshield wiper squirter bottle, the overflow bottle, like to find a CJ in this good a shape with all original stuff, absolutely no rust, and done in a pristine resto mod way, with his own little touches of black hood latches, black hinges, black wheels with the white, really makes me happy to be able to work on and drive one of these Jeeps. And with the Shackle reversal and the leaf springs, I mean, all springs are going to ride a little bit rough, but Wrangler springs, new bushing, Shackle reversal, I mean, I'll get in it and drive at 65 miles an hour down the highway and enjoy the summer. Hopefully you like Robby's CJ.